So one of the things that I was so curious about when making that transition from bedside nurse to nurse practitioner was, how's my lifestyle going to be different? So when I looked online, I couldn't really find anybody talking about it, and I didn't really know a whole lot of nurse practitioners, so I didn't really have anybody to ask. So I'm making this video for those of you who may be curious if life in general is better as a nurse practitioner versus a bedside nurse, and just to talk about my experience. So I think the thing that I was probably most curious about was the money and what my relationship with money would look like as a nurse practitioner versus a bedside nurse. So before becoming an NP, the thing that I loved the most about working on the unit as a bedside nurse was I always had the option to make more money. And that was because there were always overtime shifts available for me. So anytime I wanted to, make an expensive purchase or go on a trip or do anything that was like a little bit higher than my budget, I could just pick up a shift. It was no big deal, right? The downside to that was obviously I was trading some of my free time for work. And I hated it, but I loved to see the check, right? So in contrast, now the beautiful thing about working as a nurse practitioner and making more money is I don't have to work overtime. And my checks are just as high as, and in some instances better than they were as a bedside nurse who worked a whole lot of overtime. So I don't really have to make that trade of my time for more money, which is, it's great. So I wouldn't necessarily describe myself as a high maintenance person, but I do like to go on my trips. I just came back from France and Italy, so I do like to travel. So in general, I would say I'm able to afford the things that make me happy, and I don't have to trade my time in order to attain those things. So I think that in itself, to me, is priceless. And that alone made the transition from bedside nurse to nurse practitioner totally worth it for me. Something else that actually played a really big role in my stress level was dreading going to work as a bedside nurse. So I'm trying to pinpoint when exactly this happened in my bedside nursing career, but it got to the point where I literally would just dread going to work. I dreaded the patients. I dreaded my coworkers. I dreaded just being on the unit. There was like this anticipation, but like a negative anticipation before my shift started. And I do think that that negatively impacted my health for sure. But now, as a nurse practitioner, I don't really have that dread anymore. When I go to work, I feel much more at ease with what I'm doing. I feel more at ease with the patients. Maybe that's because I don't have as many tasks that I have to check off. I don't have a watchful eye constantly watching everything that I'm doing at work. I work alone with one or two medical assistants. So I feel a lot more at ease at work than I did as a bedside nurse. And I don't feel that stress or that dread knowing that I have an upcoming shift. If there's something that I haven't encountered before, it's more of like a curiosity, like, oh, that's interesting. Let me figure out what I'm going to do with this, rather than being stressed about doing something wrong and having the next nurse judge me about it. I don't have to really worry about any of that at my current position. I can't really speak to other positions, but in my current position at the urgent care, I don't really have to think about that, and I don't really dread anything. There is still that level of stress, but it's more like stress that I'm caring for my patients in the best possible way. Or sometimes I'll think, I wonder if this would have been a better treatment plan, versus the one that I actually decided to go with. But it definitely isn't a sense of dread and a high level of stress for me. So that actually has made a tremendous difference. So something else I wanted to touch on as far as my lifestyle as a nurse practitioner that's different than it was as a bedside nurse is my relationships are different. So it was a lot easier to maintain friendships and relationships as a bedside nurse than it is as a nurse practitioner. And I think that's mostly because I was working so closely with some of my friends that it was easy to say, hey, let's go to breakfast after work, or, hey, let's plan this trip together. Let's go here for the weekend and that sort of thing. But now as a nurse practitioner, I work by myself. I'm not really working with friends or peers like that to be able to do that stuff. So I have to work a whole lot harder to maintain my friendships outside of work than I did before. Before it was just effortless, but now I'm like, let's see if we can align our schedules and let's see if we can meet up in 2 weeks. No, that doesn't work. What about on a Wednesday? No, I work Wednesdays. Oh, maybe next Sunday. So it's just like, it's a lot harder to maintain those relationships. Whereas as a bedside nurse, we would both just take off on the same day and do whatever we wanted to. It was just easier. And now that's really not the case. I think that the work location has a whole lot to do with my lifestyle. When I had more charting and I was taking a lot of charts home, that did make me dread work. And that did happen to me as a nurse practitioner when I worked for a physical medicine and rehab group. But now, working in urgent care, I don't have to take any work home with me. As a bedside nurse, I didn't have to take any of my work home, which was also beautiful. Like, I didn't have anybody calling me saying, hey, X, Y, and Z happened with this patient. Did you do this? Or can you do that? Or you have to follow up with this when you get back to work. That didn't exist as a bedside nurse, which I loved. And it doesn't happen to me now just because I work in urgent care. So lifestyle wise, in general, I would say my lifestyle is a lot more easygoing. I get to embrace more of that soft life that everyone speaks of as a nurse practitioner versus as a bedside nurse. I feel like as a bedside nurse, I was grinding. I was grinding hard. Sometimes I was in the slums. I was getting my hands dirty, At the end of my shift, I was done. I was exhausted and I didn't want to think about work. But now, as a nurse practitioner, it's just more chill. I don't really have management breathing down my neck. I don't have a whole lot of stress. I don't dread going to work. Yeah, it can be lonely at times, but in general, I think that the trade-off was totally worth it. So that's my summary of a lifestyle as a nurse practitioner, and hopefully I was able to enlighten you guys on what it's like. Other NPs out there, what's your lifestyle like? Do you think it's better now versus when you were a bedside nurse, or vice versa? Was it better then and you're more stressed now and you hate being a nurse practitioner? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.